undertaken that process. China. Mitt Romney gets all excited about China. This president is very clear about his relations with China. Mitt Romney basically made up facts in the last debate with the president about China and its currency value, and said that the president has not pushed China to lower its currency value in order to create a more fair trading partner. In fact, the president pointed out quite clearly that China's currency value has gone down in part as a result of intense pressure by the United States. So I think that's yet another mischaracterization of the Obama presidency. How much time do I have? Okay. So, okay, I'm not going to go too much longer. I'm going to conclude. I'm going to bring things together here because I want to say something finally. I said something in the beginning about the president's leadership domestically, that is how he deals internally with his own administration. He has struggled to work with Congress, but you know, I think that's probably more certain Republican groups within Congress than that is the president. I think he's done the best that he can. But more importantly, Barack Obama knows America's place in the world. America has, for many years, of course, been the sole superpower. In the Cold War, it was one of two superpowers. Today, it remains, as many have said, the indispensable nation. And I'm not entirely favorable to that expression. But this president understands what that means. It means leading in a way that doesn't mean telling other people what to do. The Romney campaign criticized him for not leading in front in Libya, but leading from behind. Well, that may have been the wrong phrase, but it worked. Libya was probably the best use of NATO power that we've seen in a long time. The way in which the president worked with the NATO alliance in order to remove a dictator from power and put in place a democratic system, I think it demonstrates quite crucially how he understands America's place in the world. And finally, I'm, to be honest, offended in the way in which the Republicans have picked up on the death of a U.S. ambassador in Libya and politicized this issue and turned it into something that it's not. And I think the president's ability to respond to these ridiculous claims and his once again, measured, careful response to these claims just demonstrates he's the perfect person to re-elect for another 4 years.
Well, I'd like to thank the Debate Society for hosting us today. Much to their dismay, the Democrats are not running against George Bush. I know that thus far, the Obama campaign has constructed itself really to deal with the problems which arose during the Bush administration, but this is 4 years later, and many of those problems are still here. I'm going to go into some of the main issues that this campaign's been facing with regards to foreign policy issues. I'll address some of Professor Lang's concerns here. And I'm going to start with what is one of the greatest points of contention between the two candidates, because there are, in fact, a lot of ways in which the candidates are similar. One of the greatest points of dissension is defense spending. And of course, this came up in the last debate. Now, just to throw out a couple of facts, the United States spends roughly 25% of its federal budget on defense. 75% of its budget is on entitlement programs or other programs. So just to start off with, we cannot blame the defense budget for the debt crisis. In terms of a percent of our GDP, we spend only 4.7% of our GDP on defense. Now, this is a historic low, believe it or not. There have only been 2 times in our history, recent history, in which it's been this low. One was the end of the Second World War, and one was immediately before 9/11. Now, numbers of US military personnel are at their lowest since before the Second World War. Our US Navy is smaller since before the First World War. Our US Air Force is its smallest since 1947. And the US Air Force remains older than ever before. In fact, in the early 1950s, we purchased more planes than in the entire period between 1956 and 2011. Now, I'm going to take a little jab at something which Barack Obama got a few laughs at in the third debate, which is, I think it had something to do with horses and bayonets. Basically, the essence of his argument was that because our military assets are more advanced technologically, numbers don't matter to the same extent. To an extent, this is true. Smart bomb technology has reduced the need for carpet bombing. There are certain areas in which technology has advanced our military capabilities beyond size. However, something which it still has not addressed is the need to be in two places at once. I have yet to think of a soldier, a plane, or a ship that can be in two places in the world at once. And of course, if technology alone were the answer, Obama wouldn't have cut the F-35 program, wouldn't have cut the next generation cruiser, would not have cut the Marine Expeditionary Fighting Vehicle, and would have cut about 15 other military technology research and development programs. Of course, all these cuts are coming as the world isn't a dramatically safer place than it used to be. Now, a usual point that people bring up is that the US spends more than the next 10 countries combined. Now, this fact is a bit skewed. Many of the biggest spenders, Russia, China, many spenders in the Middle East, underreport or don't report sections of their military spending whatsoever. Non-state organizations and terrorist organizations obviously don't report military spending whatsoever at all. Military expenses cost less in less developed countries. In order to purchase military goods, in order to pay personnel in the United States and in Western Europe, it costs a lot more. Of course, Western European militaries are substantially smaller than that of the United States. The US spends a lot on its soldiers. We spend a lot in terms of medical care, quality of living. Many other countries don't. And at the same time, the US maintains more commitments abroad than any other power, and that's something which both Romney and Obama agree shouldn't change. The difference is Romney knows what it takes to make sure that those commitments remain. Defense spending, of course, something which the Democrats don't like to acknowledge, is also an effective way to boost the economy. It's funny because the Democrats usually tout government spending, but defense spending is one of the few areas which they will not acknowledge. So, if you want a strong military, if you want to remain true to our foreign commitments, vote no to the proposition. Now, one of the other main issues has been Afghanistan. This was a point of contention in the last debate, particularly withdrawal from Afghanistan. Now, Obama seeks a non-conditional withdrawal by 2014. He made this clear in his third debate. And he also seeks to conduct amnesty talks with the insurgency and leave the country in a good state. Unfortunately, these two commitments cannot exist side by side, and the reason is obvious. If you make it clear to the insurgency, we're going to be leaving by this date, they have no reason to come to the table. They have no reason to discuss potential alternatives for the country. They have no reason to accept any sort of amnesty because they know that we're leaving the country. So they just need to wait it out and then strike as soon as we leave. Announcing a set withdrawal date without conditions makes the insurgency more likely to engage in aggressive behavior, both before and after we withdraw. The collapse of Afghanistan's government would no doubt be a serious problem. And I personally believe, and I believe the facts state, that an early preemptive withdrawal from Afghanistan would result in the collapse of the Afghani government. It would be a disaster for the region, it would reopen the country as a terrorist safe haven, and it would potentially allow Iran to establish a stronghold and establish itself permanently as a controlling political force in Afghanistan. The Iraq withdrawal in itself was a bit premature. Al-Maliki, the prime minister of the country, has been purging the country of Sunni leadership. Less than 24 hours after the US withdrawal, he arrested the vice president of his country, a Sunni politician. He's gone after Iranian-sponsored Shiite militias and Quds Force-sponsored operators continue to infiltrate the country, and corruption seriously hinders economic development, which has slowed since US withdrawal. If you want to ensure a stable, successful withdrawal from Afghanistan, you will vote no to the proposition. Now, on the point of terrorism, many of the points that Professor Lang made were correct. We've made solid strides in combating terrorism. Of course, he alone cannot claim success for some of these, particularly the elimination of Osama bin Laden. Well, I think the president has been very eager to take claim personally for the elimination of Osama bin Laden, not necessarily emphasizing the multi-year-long effort prior to that, which gained the intelligence necessary to secure him. Now, for those against continuing some of these anti-terror efforts, for those who are more, who desire a softer approach to counter-terror, Barack Obama isn't necessarily your man. He's kept Guantanamo Bay open, something he promised to close on day one. He's extended provisions of the Patriot Act, and he's utilized assassination as a tool of foreign policy via droning in a way in which no president since the end of the Cold War has done. He's violated the sovereignty of several nations, including Yemen, Somalia, and Pakistan, in his droning efforts. Once again, not that the Republicans are necessarily against this, but it does bring an interesting point. It does bring an interesting point because I'm not attempting to convince you to vote for the Republicans. I am convincing you to vote against Barack Obama. So if you believe that any of the things that I just listed are wrong, you should not vote for the president. And finally, we're going to touch on our foreign image. How much time do I have left? Okay. I'm going to touch on our foreign image. Now, Obama maintains that his approach to the world and his approach to world leadership has made great gains for U.S. favorability and public opinion of the United States in the world. But a simple view at the statistics makes this point a bit contentious. In fact, worldwide, the image of both Barack Obama and the United States and its policies has decreased since the start of his term. A recent polling by the Pew Research Center indicated that in Europe, favorability has gone down 7%, the Arab world 10%, China 24%, Japan 11%, Mexico 13%. You get the idea. People are not as happy with the United States as they were at the beginning of his term. That alone is an indicator that his promise to bring the United States to the forefront of world leadership has thus far failed. You brought up an interesting point on Romney's gaffes in Britain. Of course, Obama himself hasn't been gaffe-free in his visits to Britain. He removed the bust of Churchill from the Oval Office. He didn't host a press conference or a dinner in Prime Minister Brown's visit in 2009. And his first visit, Prime Minister Brown gave Obama a pen made of the same wood that the desk in the White House office is made. But Obama gave Brown a DVD set of American classic films. Unfortunately, they were coded for the United States, so Prime Minister Brown could not enjoy them. He gave the Queen an iPod with some of his favorite speeches that he himself made. And he called France America's greatest ally. In the Middle East, he's made some strides, but at the same time, in Egypt, he supported Mubarak until January of 2011, once it was clear he was about to fall. Only then did he decide that he was going to support the tides of change. He didn't take the lead in Libya. The operation worked, but for a man to claim that he's going to lead from the front, it sure looked like leading from behind when the UK and France were the first to impose a no-fly zone. He opposed establishing and opposes establishing safe zones for civilians in Syria, a no-fly zone, or arming the Syrian opposition. For a man who supports increasing democratization, he's sitting back a bit and letting the war continue. The Russian reset hasn't worked. Foreign opinion continues to be low in Russia. Russian approval rating of U.S. policies currently resides at 22%. The START Treaty locked the United States missile defense to Russian approval. The United States simply cannot convert any of its current offensive nuclear capabilities to defensive capabilities. Otherwise, the Russians can withdraw from the START Treaty. In East Asia, it's a bit of a different story. Romney is seeking to label China as a currency manipulator. Now, Obama's made some good strides towards going after Chinese trade, he's filed a number of suits. But honestly, he doesn't take it far enough because the situation continues. Our debt to China continues to grow. China continues to manipulate currency. China continues to violate copyright laws. Somehow what the president's doing isn't enough. If you believe that the US should remain strong, if you believe that it shouldn't sacrifice its commitments to its allies, if you believe that it should remain consistent in its foreign policy, then you should vote no in the proposition to re-elect Barack